personality just for you, bro.
Ready? Yep. All right, let's count me down.
Go. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome back. Happy holidays to another episode of Internal Affairs, a police podcast. Okay, so today, another special guest, Robb. Thank you for coming, man.
Yeah, no problem, man. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so you and I, we're going to get into this. We're going to go back to how we met and all that stuff. I know I was working internal affairs, and you were working, I suppose, in South LA, working gangs.
I just left gangs.
Okay, but before we get into all that, of course, I have to ask the two famous episode questions. So let's go. Let's get right to it. So question number one is, on a scale to 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, please rate the importance of internal affairs in a police department and why.
All right, so the wide spectrum of what internal affairs does, I'd have to put it on an average. So I'd say the average is somewhere about a 7.5 to an 8.
I like that, okay.
Because, I mean, let's be honest, there's some things that IA is still doing out there trying to catch bad cops, planting dope on the street and having some, tweaked out, spun out citizen. Yeah. Oh, hey, I'd like to turn this in just to see what we're going to do. I mean, that's really a waste of everybody's time.
Okay. I like
But
that.
some of their other, their other investigations that they're conducting, there's a lot of importance to some of the investigations that they do conduct on keeping us above reproach.
Okay, that's fair enough. I couldn't agree with you more. I certainly can't answer that question because I am biased, considering I've worked internal affairs, but I've also worked the other side, and I would definitely say it's around there or even higher. Some of my guests have said 10. Not for the reasons that they actually like IA,
right,
but for the reasons that, it just plays a super, very important function
in
the police department. And if you really think about it, in the sense that if you're a detective investigating, if you're working patrol and you're doing, you're out there providing service, if you're working a specialized unit and developing that expertise, somehow, some way, if something goes bad,
right,
it's probably going to end up as alleged misconduct, and it's going to happen for internal affairs to play their function. And you know what? Policing our own is super, super important, so I appreciate that answer. So my next question is, what's their role? What do you think an internal affairs investigator's job is?
Well, as a detective, right, where I'm going to shoot straight forward.
Yes.
They're there to find facts, right? They're fact finders.
Okay.
It's incumbent upon that investigator that they are conducting the most thorough investigation possible, not just for the purpose of burning or exonerating whoever the officer is that's being investigated, right? But to be able to find the well-rounded 100%, 360-degree aspect of that investigation, no matter if it does exonerate or it does burn that copper or that detective who's being investigated, because that's the importance of them. But there's I hate to say three sides, but there's three sides to IA, right? You have the crim, or criminal.
Correct.
You have the admin or administrative, and then you have the workplace.
Yes.
So if we're focusing mostly on just the criminal and the admin, right?
Yes.
Finding facts is their bread and butter. And that's why I think there should be more detectives actually at IA than there are the Sergeant 2s. That's a personal thing. So.
You know what? I couldn't agree with you more. I do know in my time in LAPD working officer rep section, when we rolled out to all these critical incidents, officer-involved shootings being the most popular, because that's actually what happened the most.
Right.
A lot of the investigators from Internal Affairs, Force Investigation Division, were homicide detectives.
Correct.
Look, it's, you're a shooting officer, and that's a homicide. And guess what? Now we have to investigate whether or not your actions are justifiable or not, right? And so I totally agree with even these administrative, even the most minor misconduct. I'm a true believer, and I think you can agree with me about no stone goes unturned.
Correct.
And you should be really good at your job. But you know what? I have a subsequent question to ask you, because you just brought up a good point in terms of workplace. When investigating workplace type of alleged misconduct, who do you think should handle something like that? Should it be internal affairs, or you tell me? You feel different, that maybe another entity? Or?
I feel, now I'm going to be biased, right? Because my history in the 2 years I did abroad from patrol or investigations outside of criminal. We have an ombud section. Now, it's been grossly scaled down to, I believe, like one Sergeant 2 and one non-sworn civilian employee. But in its heyday, you had two P3s, two D2s, a sergeant one, a couple P2s,
Right.
a lieutenant two. And so you had a full-blown organism that was able to go out and do the investigations for the workplace stuff.
Yeah.
There was also a time where IA would kick some of these CFs back to ombuds when they had determined or ruled out any actual misconduct.
Correct.
And they're like, hey, man, it's just an interpersonal beef. They would kick that back to ombuds and let ombuds do that investigation.
Right.
But I don't see why ombuds can't do an investigation of workplace misconduct if there's detectives assigned to ombuds.
Right.
And there's supervisors.
Right. And for the purposes of our cop lingo, you're right. P2s are police officers.
Right.
P3 are field training officers. They're officers, detectives, and lieutenants.
And a sergeant, don't forget. There's
And a sergeant
one
as
there.
well. I just tended to ask that because I almost feel, and this is just me, that if even with ombuds, I feel like there should be maybe a personal vetting process where, like, let's say, for example, I'm working ombuds or I am working internal affairs, and there's a workplace investigation comes in, and it just so happens to be Robb or somebody else, one of my ex-partners, one of my ex-bosses.
Right.
I'm probably going to be a little biased, if you will.
You think?
Yeah, of course. I'm going to say there's just no way.
It's
right?
implicit. You know,
It's
not,
implicit.
It's not
exactly.
like you mean to do it, but
exactly.
it's going to happen.
I just feel like, and again, this is just thoughts where maybe, and I get it. Internal Affairs has over, I suppose now probably 100, maybe 200 different type of investigators. But maybe there should be a question by the boss saying, hey, do you know this person?
Right.
And if the answer is no, okay, then here you go, investigate it. But if the answer is yes, all right, cool. You know what? I'll give it to somebody else who doesn't know, because if you don't...
So you're saying you want to rule out conflict of interest?
Absolutely. Bias and conflict will
Because I feel like
always
that's
be
an
there.
argument we've been having on LAPD for decades,
Yeah,
probably, long before I got there.
And you know what? A lot of it has to do with culture. It's just unfortunately,
Right.
and we're one of the reasons why we have this platform, this show, is to try to get the message out that perhaps if you're listening out there and you are going to get into this type of business, especially in a smaller agency.
Definitely small agencies.
When I teach for Savage Training Group, one of the things I try to convey to the audience, to the student, is, look, if you guys are neighboring agencies and you're small and there's a workplace, you know what? Call the chief and
Crossover.
say exactly.
There should be a crossover. I like that.
Okay, so now let's take a trip down memory lane, if you will. Let's see, under 17 years?
Yeah, just under 17. I turned
You'll
17
be off probation
this
in
summer.
3 years, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, good. But you still look young, and you have a lot of hair that I'm very jealous of.
You always have been.
And that radio voice, that Superman look, that just doesn't, thanks, Mom and
What
Dad.
are we here for again? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This stuff.
Detective now with LAPD? Is
That's
that-
correct.
You worked gangs in South LA?
Yes.
And and at one point you did work a task force for for the feds.
Correct, I did.
Okay, good. Anything else I'm missing you can fill in the gaps for me that can highlight?
I mean, just for a well-roundedness, maybe.
Uh-huh.
I've worked patrol mostly in the South End my entire career. I did a couple years at Harbor. I did over a nickel in Southeast. I'm now currently at 77th. I did do 5.5 in East LA and Hollenbeck, both patrol and investigations, and as a detective. I did my 2 years at Ombuds, which was really eye-opening
Yeah.
to the inner workings of this mechanism that you and I have been a part of for so long. And I did a short stint for about half a year as an acting senior lead officer in Southeast,
Okay.
which gave me a totally different perspective on things.
Community.
I mean, talk about community-based. That position is probably the second best job I ever had on this department, right after being a detective.
Okay. Well, this is an internal affairs police podcast, so let's get right to it. Right. So, you've been a subject of a complaint investigation from internal affairs.
Yes, sir, I have.
Okay, and I believe that that sounded so formal, huh?
Yeah, wow.
I sound like I was an IO for a second. We met.
Flashbacks.
I believe I launched a bias policing mediation program. I was asked by the commander in internal affairs to do what I believe to be a mediation program, and perhaps you can agree with me that not many police mediation's not really popular amongst the nation.
It's not on both sides of the aisle because I think, well, we had the alternate complaint resolution.
We have the ACR.
In the field ACR.
Right.
And I think that really started a bad feeling for the bias policing complaint mediation program because officers in the field were like, oh, they're going to make me apologize, and I didn't do anything wrong. So I think that's what spun the negativity toward this program in the beginning.
So what happened?
All right, so obviously this went through mediation, so it's still covered under confidentiality even 10 years later. So I will be beholden to that because, I feel about confidentiality.
Of
so I'll be
course.
very vague. I had just left the gang unit. I was asked by the watch commander at the time to saturate certain projects because of an ongoing, very vicious and violent gang feud between multiple gangs of the different projects in the Watts area.
Okay.
I even got to pick my own partner. I picked another Marine, so I knew he'd have my back, right? And we were out there. If we saw probable cause and we didn't recognize, because the housing authority has their own set of rules, and if you don't live there and you're not visiting somebody there, you are not to be there. That's a housing authority code. So we were putting the wheels on toes of anybody who we recognized to not belong there, or anybody who was breaking any kind of penal code, vehicle code, any probable cause, because we were trying to cut down shootings in those projects.
Right.
So here it is. It's a day of the year. I don't want to get too specific, right? But the gentleman who we end up stopping is wearing a coat that just looks way too heavy and way too long for that time of year and for the weather.
Summertime?
I'm just saying it's a time of the year where this coat was just out of place, right?
Yeah.
But most importantly, we didn't recognize him.
And for the record, this was over 10 years ago. Is
This
that
is over
correct?
10 years
Yes,
ago,
it's
right,
10
right.
years ago. God, we've known each other that long. That's
It
good.
has been. It's been a while.
Yeah.
So I'll also leave my partner's name out of the mix. So
Of course.
I turned to my partner and I said, "Hey, partner, like that looks like a good stop." He's like, "Absolutely." All right. Boop. We jam him up right there in the particular projects that we were in. Asked to saturate because of my experience with the gang in the area there because of my timing in the gang unit. So as soon as we conduct a ped stop on him, who's, by the way, a ped in the roadway, he's just out in the middle of the roadway, and when he saw us make the U-turn, he jumps on the sidewalk. And it's immediately, "Why you stopped me? I didn't do anything wrong." And then he hits it. "It's because I'm black, isn't it?" But part of the time, not only is he black, he's actually from Africa.
Okay.
Still has somewhat of an accent, right? Did the whole military route to citizenship thing.
Okay.
He's been on the department almost as long as I have, right?
That's awesome.
Great guy.
Good.
Great guy. So fast forward back to it. He ends up with that whole, it's the bias thing, right? We stopped him because he doesn't look like me. So obviously the supervisor comes out and the complaint is taken for a biased policing complaint. That obviously ends up at IA, Professional Standards Bureau, gets it, right? And at that point, I guess it falls on your lap, and I'll let you take over from there.
So the program, we were asked to launch it in 2014. So yeah, it's been about 9-ish.
Right.
Yeah,
The
north of
complaint
9
was
years.
13.
And it
then
started in
was
14.
Ripe for the program for the
Yeah. And it was supposed to be a pilot
Pilot
program.
program.
Yeah, and it was a 3-year pilot program. And the idea or the purpose of doing it is to get the complainant, right, and the officer face to face through a certified professional mediator through the city attorney's office. And you know what? Let's get through impasse. Let's come to some resolution.
Right.
Because what ends up happening, especially like in a situation of these circumstances, look, if you're working a certain area and let's just say it's never resolved, chances are you're probably going to run into them again. And then what's going to happen is just you're going to create that divisiveness that we're trying to accomplish not to do, is to get some resolution and build and foster new relationships. So,
Right, but also that not only just to interject
Yes,
real
please.
quick, I mean, it's only like 6.8 square miles where I was working at that time, right?
Right.
But even if I never run across that particular individual again, for whatever reason, that word spreads like wildfire.
Yes.
Oh, that copper, this is what he's doing. And now you can run into somebody you've never run into before, but name recognition, they're like, "Oh, you're that cop that did that."
Yeah.
And so it does. It spreads.
and you're right, and no one likes to be labeled or even thought of as a racist. And you and I can't begin to tell you how many times. And interesting enough, when I'm screening these cases, is like, well, you know what? You pulled me over because of my race, and then I started looking at the circumstances. Oh, wait, hold on a second. I'm facing westbound, and your car's coming southbound, flying,
Right.
speeding high. And guess what? You got tinted windows. And then when I decide to pull you over, conduct a traffic stop, my first actual face-to-face is when you roll down your window.
Right.
And again, tensions, culture, and the history of the area, and
You got the riots in the 60s. You got the riots in the 90s.
a lot of factors.
There are.
A lot of factors. Okay, so my understanding is and of course I don't really remember, but he agreed. He agreed. I think what I used to do is I used to call the complainant first,
Right.
and it's voluntarily. Hey, sir, you know what? We have this bias policing mediation program. We'll let bygones be bygones. At least that's what the outcome should be, to get some resolution. And if you'd like to participate, let me know. And I believe he said yes. And then I called you, and of course, I'm thinking, well, he works the South End, and there's just no way that he's going to agree to something like this. Because again, the perception is what? I got to go in there and apologize. And I had to promote this program and go around and roll calls and, and tell people, look, the department will never ask you to apologize. Not your boss, not me, nobody. It's just a matter of you having, I suppose, some time and effort, and
Well, I would say good faith, remember?
it's got to be in good faith.
Fast forwarding a little bit, when you and I
Yes.
started teaching this thing, I would always say good faith
Yes.
effort. But go ahead,
Take
I'm
it from
sorry.
there. No, take it from there,
Well-
because I know we set it up, and tell me.
Yeah, but even before we set it up, so this is the controversy in this was, obviously I'm a very alpha type personality.
Yeah.
Obviously it's been 10 years. I'm a lot older. I've toned it down a lot, but I was on bonding with my second son when you were going around roll calls and you were reaching out to me.
Yeah.
You might not remember that, but you couldn't get a hold of me.
Correct.
And what ends up happening, and this is where I was like, yeah, it was right about springtime from the initial pet stop, is because it's now been almost a year, the pilot program's kicking off, and you sent me an email. And like, hey, Officer Garmong, I'm Sergeant 2 Marachi from Professional Standards Bureau Complaint Mediation Program. I don't remember verbatim exactly what you said, but you basically said, hey, your trash is about to expire, and I'm going to have to send it through the traditional route of IA, but I would really love an opportunity to get you into this pilot program so you can say your side of the story. Yeah. And that's the part that I think sold me, because when I read your last few emails, because I was reading them all right there, like in a 10 or 15 minute span, because I'm reading hundreds of emails, and the ones that said IA, I'm like, well, let me open those up.
Yeah.
But your first email, I'm like, not interested. Second email, not interested. Third email, not interested. The fourth email, you're like, dude, it's expiring. What are you gonna do? I called you, and you answered the phone relatively quick, and I was a flat out no. Your email sounded better than your sales pitch.
My email game's strong, bro.
And I'm like, man, this is not the same guy. Who am I talking to? But then you said something, and it hit me because of who I am and as a Christian, right? And you said, but shouldn't you get a chance to tell your side of the story? Man, I was like, not only that, but what if my side of the story isn't at all what he perceived? And that's when I decided, hey, you know what? Personal reflection. I get an opportunity to look at myself, not in the mirror, but from the purview of the individual who I stopped, who truly thought that I stopped him because I'm Hispanic and he's black. So we decided to do it.
So here we are at the mediation in it itself. So you attended, you made it happen, and talk to me, man. What was that like?
All right, well, it was an experience. It was definitely an eye-opener. Again, confidentiality, right? So let me be very vague and very broad. We sat down at the table. We had a great mediator. I can't even mention who was in the room because I almost slipped up. But there was a great mediator. There was another individual in the room who taught and oversaw a lot of this stuff in a great big aspect or picture of it.
Got it.
Who wanted to sit in because he wanted to see how this program was really going to look moving forward.
Correct.
And after hearing my side of the story before mediation, I think this individual really felt that I was there with that good faith that I would always talk about.
Good faith clause, absolutely.
You remember.
Yes.
5-second rapport,
That's right.
good faith clause. Those are my two selling points, right?
Yep.
So we go in. Obviously, I'm always about tie goes to the runner. So the complainant went first. I let him say his piece. I totally understood a lot of what he said.
Okay.
And a lot of it really hit home with me because I grew up, primarily in Oceanside, but I also grew up in the Rio Grande in Texas. And Rio Grande, Texas versus Oceanside, totally two different places, right? Oceanside is extremely diverse. There's a lot of culture. There's a lot of history of police brutality back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I experienced a lot of that growing up. It's part of the reason why I wanted to become a cop. But because of LAPD life on the beat, I had to be LAPD, nothing else, right?
That's right.
But because of what I had experienced growing up and what I had gone through as a teenager and a young adult, even in my Marine Corps years, I had some bad interactions with Oceanside Police Department, what he said to me, it resonated and it really hit me hard because I knew exactly what he was talking about. The only difference between what he was saying and how I had matured from where I had had my interactions or dealings with law enforcement was I had gotten to a point where I realized not everybody is the same. I can't blanket or umbrella cover everybody as the same. That mentality he hadn't quite grown into yet, but I firmly believe, like so strongly, that by the time we left that mediation room, he was feeling that way too, because some of the things that he had said conveyed to me that he now understood not everybody's the same.
And I beg to ask, what was his demeanor like, or his presence, disposition, when you first started and then when it ended? If there was a change? Or?
There was.
Really?
It opened up. I'm going to be biased a little bit. I used to teach nonverbal communications in the dispute resolution program schools, but it really started off like this.
Standoffish.
Right? It's the whole like, okay, I'm here. I agreed to be here, but what kind of nonsense am I going to hear now, right?
Right.
And slowly but surely, as we went through that process, and it was it wasn't like just an hour and out. Like it took a little while because we both had things to say. Then there's that part where you go back and forth, not angrily or violently, but like we started having an actual exchange where the mediator actually slid her chair back and was like, well, you two are fine, go ahead. But as we started to really discuss cultural issues and patterns of behavior in law enforcement and how there were like paradigm shifts between the community and the police that police that community, he started to inch forward more and be more open, and his body language changed. And before the end of it, we were pretty much leaning into this conversation, having a full-blown, grown, mature adult discussion and dialogue about why there's so many perceived misconceptions about both sides of what's going on.
Oh, absolutely. Good stuff. Okay, lessons learned. What did you learn from that? And I suppose I can ask you, did that kind of change you a little bit, or did that, having this experience, right, this session, you move forward in your career, did it change a little bit, or?
Right. So we'll take the lessons learned. We'll back pocket that for a second, right?
Let's go takeaways. What are takeaways?
So honestly, a takeaway for me was that, I don't want to sound repetitive and redundant from your previous guests, but because it's become a thing in the last 15, 20 years, right? Us versus them. One of my takeaways was it doesn't have to be us versus them. We got to build bridges that close these gaps. We can no longer let these gaps define us. And then when I say us, I mean all of us. People, human beings,
yes,
right? Children of God. Like, we can't allow it to be us versus them. There should not be a them. It should all be an us. So one of the takeaways was these are the types of moments that we need to have more often, where we can sit down and have civil discourse. And I feel like we've really gotten even further away from that the last 5 to 7 years because of political climate and whatnot. But really, that's what needs to happen.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I thank you for all that. Anything else that we can grab out of that experience? Because I really appreciate you sharing that to the point where not many people are aware that you even probably did something like that, let alone whoever's listening, whoever's watching. Mediation's the way to go. Some departments probably have somewhat of a conflict resolution, alternative kind of program. Look, it's a tool, it's a resource, and you know what? If you don't have it, maybe you should start thinking about implementing one in your department.
You should, absolutely. And the best place to do that probably is to establish an ombuds office. And if you've got a department of 8, maybe you outsource that to like whatever your city attorney or district attorney office looks like. But earlier you asked, how did that influence or impact my career moving forward, right? And well, you already kind of know some of the answer to that, hugely. Because as a Christian, I feel like there's certain things that we are given called gifts, right? And I think one of those gifts that was given to me was I don't want to say power to, but the ability to really have good conversations with people and maybe impact them in ways that others might not be able to impact them. And so I really devoted a lot of my time into learning more about mediation and learning more about communication, and sometimes the teacher can't do, right? Like,
Right, of course, of course.
those who can't teach, maybe, I'm a very strong personality, and maybe sometimes it doesn't always work for me.
Right.
I can teach others
Yeah.
to do it great, but me, it's like, I don't know, man. I
get it.
really
Yeah.
blew it on that one.
Yeah.
But that was what happened, right? So I ended up going to all kinds of classes. In fact, you got the Los Angeles City Bar Association to waive my fees to go to a mediation course for an entire week. That is where I actually ended up meeting my teaching partner for years, Talene Bahadarian, who's an amazing lawyer and mediator. And then obviously I met with Shafin Roberts, the director of the LA City Dispute Resolution Program, who's one of our
dude's
best
doing
friends.
good, yeah.
I mean, he's teaching at Pepperdine.
Balling out over there
Yeah.
with the program.
He's probably pulling us going, hey man, you guys need to get in on this.
Yes, yes.
But life, right?
Yes, absolutely. I can only say that I can only echo, and I suppose you can agree with me, we shouldn't work in silos. We should all work together.
We should all work together.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's move on to the next segment. So this is, you know what? It used to be Best and Worst. And, I got that from Dan Patrick, my favorite sportscaster and show, where we talk about best and worst. But I'm going to go with worst first in terms of your career. So tell me worst incident or radio call or what happened in your career that you can share with us.
All right. So,
There's so many.
there's a lot of stuff, but I'm gonna take it back to a time before even this mediation happens, where we're starting to see a big divide again between law enforcement and the citizens in the communities that we protect and police. And so, when I was asked about, how I interact with people that live in South LA, since I don't live there, in one of the classes where we were teaching mediation, I said, I think you have it misconstrued. I'm as much of a resident as everybody that I help police because I spend more time here in the community than I do at my own house.
That's right.
We spend a lot of time
Very well
there.
said.
And so one of the incidents that happened, it was the 4th of July. It was 2011. I've been working the gang unit for well over a year. So I'm deep into my second year as a gang copper in Watts. And all of a sudden, I think it was HACLA who put it out first. They put out a backup. And that backup quickly becomes a help call. That help call quickly becomes an outer agency request for help. So a 1099 now, right?
Wow, yeah.
We don't say 1099, but
No,
everybody
but
else says,
10
right?
codes.
But we put out a help call that becomes a 1099 to all neighboring agencies, including CHP.
Wow.
I believe one or two cars of actual local feds might have even shown up.
Okay.
And what had happened was HACLA had tried to break up a party that got out of hand in the Nickerson Gardens, where the infamous Bounty Hunter Bloods reside, right, and rule in terror. And before you knew it, a big brawl had broken out. So gangs is responding. We get there, we're on ground, we're having to put hands on people, put people in cuffs, and before you know it, they're launching professional grade fireworks over buildings into us. And cops are getting burned, and there's explosions. The airship actually put it out as officers need help, they're being mortared. And I would tell you, I've been mortared plenty of times overseas in the Marine Corps, and it wasn't much different. And people might think, they're only fireworks. No, these are the professional grade ones. These are the giant canisters where it shoots out a main firework, and then there's subsequent explosions off the main one, right? And this went on for a few hours. And so people are like, that didn't sound too bad. I mean, nobody was seriously injured on either side of this conflict, but you have to understand the level of discontent in the community at that point, that we're now basically sending somewhat of a rocket launcher device into cops. How much do they really hate us that they would love to do nothing more than to take our lives by causing explosives in our faces? Because some of these things were pretty close to our heads, right?
Wow.
And so I would say it was the worst because it showed me that we were, at that moment anyways, if we were to just encapsulate that we were just no further along in bridging these gaps than we had been in the 60s, 70s, or 80s.
Wow. Okay, best. Give me a best, man. Give me a good one. Give me a funny one, if you will.
Man, are there funny
I think best is funny, too.
I know, but
One of my guests came in here and told a really funny one. But or a best one,
I just feel
something rewarding, something that you know where you went and you just felt like man, I'm so glad I'm doing this job, or something along those lines.
I don't know,
If you have one.
I mean, I'll tell you what. So obviously I started going around teaching this mediation thing, right? I'll take it back to the mediation thing while we're here for
Yeah.
the whole IA thing. And Shoffin Roberts would do this thing where he'd bring in mediators and those of us who teach mediators, and we were going around the different divisions and stuff, and or actually the different bureaus, and different people from the divisions were coming in, especially supervisors. And it was kind of like a roadshow, how we're selling it to supervisors that instead of just straight going 128 CF number, boom, send it off to IA and or ACR,
Right.
talk to these citizens about the dispute resolution program that we were having within the department, which I believe is now called Community Police Unification Program. But back in our day,
That's
in
right.
the heyday, right,
The heyday.
pilot program, the first
Yeah, we
few
started
years, it was the bias policing complaint mediation program.
Yeah.
No wonder they changed it. But I remember going to one of these things, the road show, and Shoffin would always introduce me as one of his most successful stories, right? Like, this is one of the most successful stories. You got this Southeast Watts gang copper, Marine guy, and as hard as they come, including hard-headed, and he went in there and came out a totally different person. He now teaches for us. I'd like you to hear a few words from him. This was down at the fire station across the street from Southeast Station, right? So right there in Watts off of 108th Street, and they were using the community room there. And I met this individual who'd had a really horrible experience with LAPD from his perspective.
Right.
But then you hear the other cops talk about it, and you're like, it was very similar to what I'd gone through.
Correct.
But maybe they were a little bit heavier handed because there was actually some level of crime element other than just like petting the roadway and we don't recognize you from the housing authority. This guy was actually an amateur stand-up comedian. Okay?
Wow.
So he gets up, and when I'm teaching, I'm pretty funny when I'm teaching. This is different. We're in a podcast situation. We're having an interview. I try not to be too loose because we got to sell a story, right?
That's your second act. I know,
But
it's your second job.
when we're teaching, man, like I'm up there cutting up, and this guy goes in front of me, right? And he does his thing, and people are they're falling out of their chairs, man. I'm sure there's puddles, like people were peeing their pants, and I'm like, I'm not following that guy, Sean. I'm not following that guy. So I get up there, I do my thing. It's decent. I get a few less chuckles than I normally would because obviously I followed this guy.
Yeah.
So him and I end up interacting. We changed phone numbers, right? For like 2 years after that, I've been trying to catch this guy's comedy show. Man, I've been trying to catch this guy's comedy show every 3 months that he's performing downtown at the Laugh Factory or something. And finally, he texts me, and he's like, look, man, I don't care what you got going on, cop or no cop, on duty or no duty, you guys call it banging in, you better bang in. I already put you on the VIP list.
Yeah.
You're what is it, the at call or at will window?
Yeah,
Because you and your wife's tickets are already waiting.
That's awesome.
I'm like, okay, man, I can't make an excuse. So, of course, I tell Tassie. Tassie's up for it. He's like, all right, we're going downtown. Let me just change out my wedding ring set to the wedding band. I don't want to draw attention. And we'll shoot down there. We went down there, man, and the dude was hilarious. He was the funniest one up there. But at the very end, he did this little thing, like an outro. He's like, I just want to introduce my brother Robb. He's in the crowd right there. Hey, man, that's one of the good ones. And hearing a guy who ultimately, and he would admit it, hated us, man, to hear him say that, he's like, all right, so nobody messed with him and his beautiful wife on their way out. In fact, give him a big thank you. Like, that was one of the best moments of my career because it showed me that what we were doing, him and I, and this mediation program, and us being able to bring two sides of a conflict together with a neutral party in the middle to get everybody's perspective was making a big difference in the community.
Wow. Thank you.
Of course.
Well, look, we're at the end now, so leave us with something. Let's see, what would you tell a young officer, someone that's coming on, any parting ways, any message or reflection about this profession? What would you tell someone? And,
All right, well, I would say this. Listen, the mechanics of what we do is always and ever changing. Obviously, when we came on, things were different. When Marlon came on, man, they didn't even have rovers. They had keys to blue boxes to phone call for help. No, I'm kidding. He didn't come on that long ago.
No.
But we did. We are in an ever-changing profession that is only demanding more and more from us. We're under public scrutiny every day. So what I would tell those that are looking to come into this profession, if you were like me, and you were from the age of 8 years old knowing that all you ever wanted to do was be a Marine and be a cop, and being a cop meant being LAPD because we're the best, then you pursue that. But you pursue that knowing in your head and forefront of your mind that you're going to have to adapt and adjust to certain things. I'm not saying you need to come out here and give everybody a handshake when they require a thump, but you're going to have to adapt to the cameras. You're going to have to adapt to satellites and drones or whatever else is going on these days that's keeping 360 coverage over us. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You got to learn how to use that to your advantage to show that you're doing your job right. But if you come on this job because you graduated college and you have a doctorate degree, but no hospital will hire you for whatever reason, and I'm being a little facetious, but you're coming on this job solely because you think that this is the only place you can get a good paycheck with good benefits, you're not coming on this job for the right reason. Go be a firefighter or go do something else, but this is not the profession for you. Just because you have a college degree doesn't make you smarter than the guy who's a beat cop who grew up in the hood and knows how to police people because he knows what to do. That's different than what was being done to him. Come on this job and make a difference. Make that difference a positive one, not a negative one. And for those of you who are coming into this profession for the right reasons and you come to LAPD, man, we'd love to have you. And I welcome you with wide arms and big hugs. So God bless you all.
Amen to that, man. Okay. One take Robb.
One take.
You know,
It's better than the other name.
Well, you know, the one take Robb is because, you know, we came in here, did a little B-rolling before, and it only took one take. Is that correct? Yeah. So, hey, thank you. Always, we haven't seen each other in a while, dude. I just thank you so much for, you know, being part of this important platform as we get the message out in this podcast. Hey, don't forget to push the like button, subscribe, and share and download as much as you can. And on that note, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and like always, don't forget to go Code 6. Thank you.
All right, brother. Oh, another one in the can for you.
Good job. Did you get a picture?